It's a common belief in literature and film that a book will always be better than its movie adaptation. Usually, I believe this is true. Books have many advantages over films. They can contain more story in the book, while a movie usually has a time limit and has to cut things out. Books also can just tell more than a movie is able to. Added to that, many things from the book may be, lost in interpretation.
"Did you put your name into the goblet of fire, Harry?" Dumbledore asked calmly.
Harry! I protest!
Harry, you put your name in the goblet of fire.
No, sir.
The people making the movie may incorrectly interpret events or characters or just change things that end up harming the final product. However, movies do have a good set of tools that books do not have. Cinematography, acting, unique direction, and music. Movies are also more capable of showing over telling in some cases compared to books. Movies aren't always destined to be worse than the books they're interpreting, which brings us along to the topic of the video. Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption is a 1982 Stephen King novella following a convicted felon named Red as he recounts his memories of a prisoner named Andy Dufresne. Anyone that knows anything about books knows that Stephen King is kind of a big deal. He's made some of the most popular books ever, but is primarily known for his horror, works like It pretty much, and a great deal of his works have been made into films. Anyone that knows anything about movies knows about The Shawshank Redemption. It is the 1994 adaptation to King's Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption. It is also IMDb's top movie, like on the entire website, so you could probably guess that it was a pretty good adaptation. But it is my belief that this movie goes beyond just a good adaptation. I believe this movie is better than the book. Bit of a daring thing to say, but let me explain why. The main theme of Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption is that of hope. It's a great lesson about holding on to hope even in the worst of situations. On top of that, it also includes lessons and criticisms of the US prison system, which is one of the main reasons why the Shawshank Redemption didn't do too well initially. It mainly focuses on the idea of becoming institutionalized, which is when prisoners become so used to being in a prison they can't survive on the outside world. It also shows a great example of friendship. Now, the movie had to adapt the story of the book while also reflecting these themes. However, this book is not exactly the easiest thing in the world to adapt. The majority of it is just Red explaining things, and it's not in chronological order. Red's reminiscing jumps back and forth through decades, so the movie obviously had to make changes to make it both enjoyable and comprehensible as a movie. This eventually would lead to the movie makers writing their own content. This is a risky thing with adapting a book because the movie writers may not make something as high quality as the writer, or it may not reflect the themes as well or stuff like that. Movie writers adding their own content is especially not popular today after the Hobbit trilogy. So, the writers had to make new content that both added to the story and reflected the themes I just talked about. Before I tell you what was added, I want you to think, what was your favorite part of the movie? What parts of the Shawshank Redemption stick out to you the most? I'd wager quite a bit that at least one of your top moments was original to the movie. The going fishing scene at the beginning of the movie was original, with Red only mentioning going fishing near the end of the novel. The opera scene was completely original, and arguably the most powerful scene, Brooks's freedom, was completely original. But let's look at how these add to the movie. The going fishing scene gives us a good understanding of how brutal the prison is right at the start of the movie. After this and the reveal that the prisoner getting beaten didn't survive, the viewers have a good understanding of the brutality of the prison world. It instantly shows the poor living conditions the prisoners have to endure. And again, all this was from a mention of going fishing from Red towards the end of the book. Secondly, we have the amazing opera scene. Seriously, this scene is incredibly powerful. None of this was in the books, yet the writers added more narration from Red that sounded like it could have come straight from the book. This scene especially reflects the theme of hope and the idea that Andy is the clashing force against the idea of becoming institutionalized. This is especially shown in Red's narration of the scene.
It was like some beautiful bird flapped into our drab little cage and made those walls dissolve away. And for the briefest of moments, every last man at Shawshank felt free.
Lastly, the scene where Brooks gets let out of prison. Arguably the most powerful scene, but definitely the saddest. Brooks is mentioned in the books, but he is nowhere near as significant of a character as he is in the movie. In the book, Brooks gets let out of prison and then is said to have died in an old folks' home, and his pet bird Jake actually belongs to a prisoner named Sherwood Bolton in the books. So the movie version is a combination of these two characters. In the books, after the bird is released, it is later found dead in the yard, seeming to have starved to death. This is symbolic of the prisoners, seeing that after a lifetime of being in captivity, they can't survive on the outside world. But for the movie, instead of having the bird be symbolism, it just actually shows what happens to a released convict. A bunch of Brooks' narration from this scene is actually taken from Red's narration towards the end of the book when Red gets released. So they actually kinda combined three characters, but instead of Brooks just dying in an old folks home, he takes his own life. This is a stronger showcase that the institutionalized convicts can't survive on their own. This scene is also heavily referenced later on in the film when Red gets released. His life outside practically mirrors Brooks, the only difference being Red had hope because of Andy, which is the reason he was able to survive. So basically a weird combination of a bunch of parts from the book led to one of the saddest scenes in movie history. Now, let's look at what the movie changed from the books. Obviously they changed Red, who was originally an Irish American and is now Morgan Freeman. It honestly is just a bonus because we get to have Morgan Freeman narrate the entire movie, so good job movie makers. We also have a pretty big change in characters. Obviously they added recurring characters besides just Andy and Red, but they also decided to keep Byron Hadley throughout the entire film. In the book, after the rooftop scene, he isn't really important anymore, but the movie kept him, which I'm fine with. He is an entertaining character, and his actor 5 years later went on to voice a not too memorable character in a not too well-known small cartoon. It wasn't very big. Also, he was in Detroit Become Human.
I want my money, Mr. Squidward!
The next change is similar to keeping Byron. It's the decision to have one warden the entire movie. In the book, there's 3 wardens, but in the movie, they only have Warden Norton. I mean, in the books, he was pretty much the only important one, but I could understand the argument that it harms the feel of the passage of time. These characters outlasting multiple wardens emphasize how much time has passed, but the movie couldn't possibly have had time for all 3, and Norton is a good antagonist throughout the entire film. The next big change is the fate of Tommy. In the books, he is offered a deal to go to a better prison if he doesn't talk about the stuff that could prove Andy's innocence. However, in the movie, well... Yeah, I know it probably takes off from the realism aspect, or at least I hope this isn't realistic of actual prisons, but there's 2 reasons why it's better. It builds up Norton as a big antagonist. All of that build-up is eventually paid off in a satisfying way. Secondly, it's more realistic in terms of Tommy and Andy's relationship. I kinda considerably doubt Tommy betraying Andy, at least in the movie, because you actually get to see how much Tommy looks up to Andy. In the books, you're just going off of Red's recounting, so maybe he would in the book. The next thing I want to bring up is kinda the entire finale of the movie. Everything after the build-up to the escape I want to compare to the book. In the book, after Tommy leaves, and Andy realizes his chance of being set free is gone, his usual high spirits have left him. Red notices how he's not his normal self that looks like he has no business being in a prison. He looks like the other cons, and that hopeful attitude has left him. Eventually, he gets his high spirits back, tells Red about his saved money in Zihuatanejo, and then disappears one day. Seriously, in the book, Andy tells Red about his secret bank account in Zihuatanejo, then Red starts talking about other prison escapes that have happened. Then he says how he suspected Andy may try to escape, and then a paragraph just starts with, "In 1975, Andy Dufresne escaped from Shawshank." Afterwards, there's Red's slow retelling of what the guards did, and like hours and hours later do they find the hole behind the poster. Now, let's look at how the movie pulls all this off. To begin with, Andy doesn't just have some out-of-nowhere bank account with tons of money in it like he did in the book. In the book, he set up this account with a bunch of stocks right before he went to prison. In the movie, he makes this account through Norton's illegal activities, so poetically, Norton helped in his own downfall. Also, in the movie, Andy escapes before he leaves his depressed phase. Andy leaves pretty much right after Tommy dies. This makes it so that Red, instead of suspecting Andy will try to escape, suspects that Andy will try to kill himself. This leads to an initially tension-filled scene with the assumption that the guards will find Andy has taken his own life. Now, remember how I said movies have tools that books don't? This scene is why I said that. The cinematography at a particular moment in this scene leads to one of the most iconic shots in film, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The guards find Andy is not in his cell, and instead of Red just overhearing all of this happen, he is actually brought into the cell and gets to be there. On top of that, instead of the warden searching Andy's cell hours later, he does it right there and then. In his rage, he throws Andy's rock collection around until eventually he throws it through the poster and it echoes. And then comes the phenomenal shot of the discovery of the hole in the wall. Shortly after, it shows how Andy escaped from Shawshank. On top of that, the movie adds Andy exposing Norton's crimes and leads to Norton shooting himself. Seriously, that was not in the book. Norton just resigns later. The book did not have his crimes being exposed or his death. The movie even adds this little unique narration line.
I like to think the last thing that went through his head, other than that bullet, was to wonder how the hell Andy Dufresne ever got the best of him.
The movie also adds the repeated parole hearings of Red. This eventually leads to his final one, where he breaks his usual repeated lines and shows how much he has changed. And, as previously mentioned, the movie shows Red living on the outside. The scene mirrors that of Brooks living on the outside, but Red does not kill himself. Red instead has hope because of Andy, and therefore can make it on the outside world. Also, the movie actually shows Red and Andy reuniting, just to give a happy conclusion. The book instead ended with Red on his way to Mexico saying how he now had hope. Even besides just adding moments and changing events from the book, the movie is an incredible adaptation of the book. Even if you don't think it's better than the book, you gotta admit it is a good adaptation. The last movie that I can think of that did the narration of a first-person book in a movie was The Great Gatsby, and just look at how that movie turned out.
You shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Gatsby looked in that moment as if he had killed a man.
The movie does a great job at capturing the important moments from the book, and the acting is phenomenal. Even though Tim Robbins doesn't match the physical descriptions of Andy from the book, he kills it at the actual mannerisms. Morgan Freeman also does a good job, but you knew that. It's Morgan Freeman. You knew he did a good job. Anyway, what I consider improvements from the book added with just the great adaptation of the book is what makes me believe The Shawshank Redemption is better than the book. Before I end this video, I want to thank everyone who watched, especially if you made it this far into the video. This was my first video about a movie, so kinda new territory. I will probably make more videos talking about movies. I have a general idea for the next one. Along with that, I've got about 3, maybe 4 video games I want to make a video about, so that will be fun. I'm currently working on a video for one of those games, but I messed up recording it, and now a bunch of the footage is in like 144p, so I'm kind of an idiot. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.
Get busy living, or get busy dying. That's goddamn right.